Jetson! Caught you again. Now stop goofing off on my time.
Your time! Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
The Jetsons are the 60s era family of the future, created by mega producers William Hanna and Joe Barbera, following the insane popularity of their classic animated series, The Flintstones. With only 24 episodes in its original series, The Jetsons would never gain the popularity and longevity of its counterpart series, with only a small handful of revivals following in its path. The series would, however, do its part in changing the future, enormously impacting the contemporary way of life in our real-world 21st century. In 2022, the Jetsons celebrate 60 years, and to help them, I will trace their entire evolution from 1962 to now. To do so, we will look at the franchise's entire history, touching on their various changes and influences over 6 decades of series, specials, and feature films. In this edition of Cartoon Evolution. Following 20 years of success on Tom and Jerry cartoons at MGM, and after revolutionising TV animation in the late 1950s with a series of successful morning programs, animators William Hanna and Joseph Barbera turned their sights to primetime, debuting the Flintstones in 1960 as the first ever primetime animated series, and the first to take a 30-minute sitcom formula. Flintstones was a send-up of contemporary working-class life, but set in prehistoric times. Regardless of its setting, animation historian Jerry Beck noted that viewers saw themselves in the series, resulting in an immediate cross-generational hit, a cultural phenomenon, and a multi-million-dollar marketing machine. Lasting 166 episodes over 6 seasons and spawning dozens of spin-offs, Flintstones held the title of the longest-running, most financially successful TV cartoon series for over 30 years. After its insanely successful debut season, the ABC network clamoured to Hanna-Barbera for more new series. First, the studio delivered Top Cat in 1961, focused on a swindling alley cat and his posse. While it didn't prove anywhere near as successful, ABC still wanted another new cartoon for the 1962 season. With the Flintstones gaining momentum and headed into its 3rd season, Barbera projected that a companion series would be the way to go, and what better way to do it than to flip the concept and, in his words, do the same thing but in the future. Barbera formulated a sitcom which could act as the Flintstones' space-age counterpart, similarly seeing characters dealing with contemporary issues but in the distant future of the 21st century. Hanna-Barbera's 1962 press announcement noted, "In their wondrously wacky world, the surroundings and gadgets have all changed, naturally for the better. But the problems we know and cope with are, to be sure, still around." Of course, ideas of the 21st century weren't foreign to American audiences in the 1960s, with the real-life space race taking off between the US and Russia in the 50s, and US President John F. Kennedy promising to put a man on the moon in 1961, both propagating a space craze that swept the country. Science fiction media ran rampant over the pop culture landscape. Entertainment icon and film pioneer Walt Disney had been spruiking futurist visions on his TV show and in his theme parks for half a decade, and the middle 60s saw a plethora of popular series and movies spawn, such as Irwin Allen's Lost in Space, Jerry Anderson's The Thunderbirds, Stanley Kubrick's 2001 A Space Odyssey, and Gene Roddenberry's Star Trek. It's really no surprise that Barbera came up with the Jetsons concept when he did, essentially taking 2 popular crazes of the era, the Flintstones and space, and melding them together the same year that JFK made his promise. Naturally, ABC greenlit the project immediately. In crafting the show, Hanna-Barbera drew from numerous inspirations. One of the most notable includes the 1962 book 1975 and the Changes to Come by futurist Arnold B. Barrack, described as a dramatic forecast of the pattern of life ahead, which inspired many of the futuristic gadgets and gizmos on the show. Design-wise, animators drew heavily on Googie architecture, a futurist style that was popular in America at the time, particularly prevalent in Southern California, where Hanna-Barbera had their studios. The style was hallmarked by exaggerated angular designs and geometric shapes, utilized steel, glass, and neon materials, and featured space-age iconography, such as atoms, flying saucers, and spacemen. It's also clear that much of the costume designs drew heavily from iconic serial Buck Rogers, which saw a TV revival in the 1950s, though much space-age iconography has been inspired by vintage 20th century pulp sci-fi in general. Where Hanna-Barbera pulled the name Jetson from is undocumented, but it's a clear play on the space-age theme. This gimmick was also used for other names featured throughout the series, including Spacely, Galaxy, Orbit, Skylar, and Cogswell. Much like the Flintstones, the Jetsons followed the 30-minute sitcom formula, complete with artificial laugh track, and was produced in Hanna-Barbera's signature assembly line limited animation style known as planned animation. This utilized continuously looping backgrounds and characters whose bodies remained stationary while their heads, hands, and feet made small bobbing movements. Now that Hanna-Barbera were producing more animation in just 1 week than they would in an entire year at MGM, corners obviously had to be cut. In the same way that the Flintstones envisioned prehistoric versions of modern conveniences, the Jetsons imagined futuristic versions of the same. Most of the series' humour was drawn from the simple concept of placing the now in the later, with Barbera particularly fond of gags that came from people travelling via moving sidewalks, flying cars getting stuck in traffic, and the concept of futuristic parking. Where the Flintstones was set in the ancient town of Bedrock in the year 10,000 BC, the Jetsons was set above the clouds in the advanced Orbit City in the then distant 2062. While the leading characters of the Flintstones at this point were two childless couples, the Jetsons depicted a singular family unit. Danny Graydon, author of The Jetsons, the official cartoon guide, noted, "The series coincided with this period of American history when there was a renewed hope. There was something very attractive about the nuclear family with good honest values thriving well into the future. However, artists did go through various character lineups. Some early concepts showed just a husband and wife, some added only a daughter, and others added only a son. Later concepts showed the whole family and a dog. While the characters' designs fluctuated in these early concepts, their key features didn't change enormously, with artists quickly settling on the finalized designs. The family consisted of George Jetson, described as a family man who would much rather spend his time sleeping or playing golf than pushing buttons for 3 grueling hours a day. His wife Jane, the ultimate space-age housewife. His daughter Judy, the typical teenage girl obsessed with boys, rock stars, and clothes. And his boy Elroy, an exemplary student who is fond of anything that involves gadgets and robotics. Completing this nuclear family were the Jetsons' dog Astro and robotic maid Rosie. The voice cast included comedic actor George O'Hanlon as George, actress Penny Singleton as Jane, and legendary voice artists Dawes Butler as Elroy and Janet Waldo as Judy in her first cartoon role. Completing the ensemble were 3 prolific voice talents: Wilma Flintstone herself, Jean Vanderpyle as Rosie, Don Messick as Astro in a style he'd later bring to Hanna-Barbera's other famous pup, Scooby-Doo, and the man of 1,000 voices, Mel Blanc, as George's boss, Mr. Spacely. Where characters of the Flintstones had taken direct inspiration from the Honeymooners, the Jetsons clan were more or less an original creation inspired by the ideal family regularly depicted in sitcoms. Graydon further noted, "I think that chimed with the zeitgeist of the American culture of the time. However, as a companion series, some of the character dynamics certainly drew from that of the Flintstones. Some, however, have speculated that popular comic, radio, and film franchise Blondie was the basis of the Jetson family, with the characters sharing various similarities. Interestingly, Penny Singleton actually portrayed Blondie in the strip's radio program and in 28 feature films between 1938 and 1950. These connections were never addressed by Hanna or Barbera, though given their penchant for basing their franchises on existing properties, it doesn't seem too far-fetched an idea. The Jetsons first hit airwaves on May 1st, 1962, running as ABC's Sunday night 7:30pm programming, making history as the network's first program to premiere in colour. While the Flintstones had always been produced in colour, it was aired in black and white for its first 2 seasons. Unfortunately, The Jetsons didn't prove to be a runaway success, and was cancelled after only 1 season of 24 episodes, concluding on March 3rd, 1963. Various explanations for the show's failure have been theorised. One suggests that with the Cold War raging and an impending nuclear holocaust, American audiences were growing ever pessimistic about the future, while another suggests that by 1962, the 50s sitcom family had grown tired, with wacky characters now taking centre stage of the genre. Another strong theory suggests that with only 3% of homes actually owning colour TVs in 1962, a majority of viewers experienced the vibrant and vivacious program in black and white, making its vision of the future seem flat, dull and drab and unappealing to audiences. It could simply be, however, that it was crushed by the competition, with the show airing opposite Walt Disney's insanely popular NBC series Wonderful World of Colour, the same series which also brought an end to CBS's long-running Dennis the Menace the following year. Strangely enough, the Jetsons actually lasted longer in comic books, with various comic series running between 1963 and 1978, from Gold Key, Charlton and Marvel. Following its initial run, The Jetsons was moved to Saturday mornings, soon to be a common strategy to help failed primetime cartoons find a more successful audience. Thankfully, the series performed so well in its new block that reruns aired almost continually for 20 years. With stints on ABC, CBS and NBC, Jetsons is one of only a few series in history, including Hanna-Barbera's Johnny Quest and Warner's Looney Tunes cartoons, to air across all 3 major US networks. Across this time, the episodes were repeated on loop, with many children not even realising they were watching the same 24 episodes over and over and over again. In 1974, Barbera did propose a sequel series to CBS, which would have focused on Elroy as a teen and Judy as a career woman, somewhat similar to the studio's 1971 Flintstones spin-off, The Pebbles and Bam Bam Show. The network, who were satisfied enough with the high ratings generated by the reruns, saw no point in making new episodes, instead suggesting a futuristic cartoon series based on popular live-action series The Partridge Family, characters of which had starred in recurring roles on Hanna-Barbera's 1977 show Goober and the Ghost Chasers. Enticing Barbera with the coveted 9 AM slot, he agreed to produce Partridge Family 2200 AD. Even on brief look, similarities to the Jetsons were enormous. In 1981, however, Astro found himself starring in Space Stars, a new Hanna-Barbera show which featured segment Astro and the Space Mutts, teaming him up with Cosmo, Dipper and their human leader Space Ace as galactic police officers. Space Stars was a short-lived 11-episode series, with 1 7-minute Space Mutt short per episode. By the 1980s, with the morning market now overcrowded by cartoons with much larger episode numbers, short-run series became less valuable to networks, who were hesitant to pick up shows with less than 65 episodes, which allowed 5 showings a week for 3 months without repeat. As a result, many short-run series were thrown back into production to boost episode numbers and offer more enticing syndication packages. As such, Hanna-Barbera revisited the Jetsons in the mid-80s, producing a further 51 episodes to run in a 75-episode syndication package as part of the Fantastic World of Hanna-Barbera, first running between 1985 and 1987. While the reboot was built in the same mold, it was targeted at a younger demographic. Stories also took a more fantastical sci-fi direction, with episodes trading clever social commentary and witty satire for sillier, more whimsical adventures. Additionally, with with a higher budget and modern filmmaking tools at their disposal, the series' visuals were much cleaner, animation was less limited, colours more vibrant, and backgrounds more detailed. Most episodes utilised a digital ink and paint workflow instead of the traditional ink and cell production methods of the classic. The series was also rid of laugh track, now an outdated inclusion in cartoons. Though these changes helped distinguish the new episodes, to tie the entire series together, new credit sequences were created for the package, with the now iconic theme song remixed. Additionally, the originals were retrofitted with the same title cards used on the new ones. All of the original characters and their voice artists returned, though Astro and Rosie were given larger roles, the latter of which only appeared in 2 episodes of the original series. A new character was also added to the roster, Orbity, a small furry alien with spring legs and suction cup feet adopted by Elroy. He was voiced by legendary voice artist Frank Welker. Like many characters added to series reboots, such as Scooby-Doo's Scrappy-Doo, Orbity was decried by audiences, referred to by Matt Novak of Smithsonian Magazine as the Jar Jar Binks of the Jetsons world. Otherwise, the new episodes were well received by audiences, and while not as beloved, do hold a special place for many fans. These episodes continued to run in the syndicated block for the best part of a decade. Soon after, 2 90-minute specials were produced for the Hanna-Barbera Superstars 10 telemovie series. 1987 saw The Jetsons Meet the Flintstones, in which the Jetsons finally met their Stone Age counterparts after getting stuck in a malfunctioning time machine. While the Jetsons find themselves stuck in the past, the Flintstones end up stuck in the future, both struggling to get back to their timelines. The time-hopping journey was likely inspired by Back to the Future, an enormous box office hit 2 years prior. Then in 1988 came Rockin' with Judy Jetson, a pop fantasy adventure which saw Judy and her rock star crush Sky Rocker going head to head with a witch who wants to banish music forever. Both films returned the original cast and were reasonably well received. In the middle 80s, Paramount Pictures attempted a live-action adaptation, which was allegedly set to star Chevy Chase as George and Goldie Hawn as Jane. Despite the project quickly falling apart, Paramount were so confident the film would materialise, they slipped a sly cross-promotion into the print ads of their 1985 fantasy sci-fi, Daryl. In the late 80s, Universal Pictures purchased film rights, working with Hanna-Barbera to produce Jetsons the Movie, which released theatrically in July of 1990. While heavily based on the 1980s series, the movie sees a more dystopian setting, revealing Earth's smog pollution as the reason Orbit City is skybound. Here, the Jetsons are relocated to an asteroid where Mr. Spacely puts George to work on a new mining colony. After George's job is continuously sabotaged, it's revealed that Spacely's project is destroying a colony of beings known as the Grungies, who are fighting back. George is then, in good conscience, put on a path to set things right. Much like the reboot, the movie aimed itself at a younger audience, with cute and fantastical creatures and a soundtrack by teen pop sensation Tiffany. With a reasonable budget, the movie moved away from limited animation, with a smoothly animated style and highly detailed characters and backgrounds. Again, animation was produced digitally, even incorporating CGI elements, which Hanna believed gave the film a spectacular look that helped add a lot of depth, and Barbera felt gave a real sense of movement. Critics, however, criticised the CGI's plastic look and its stark distinction from the 2D elements and characters. Though most of the cast returned to their roles, both O'Hanlon and Blank passed away soon after recording their lines, with voice actor Jeff Bergman recording pickup dialogue for George Jetson and Mr. Spacely. Dawes Butler had likewise passed away prior to the film's recording, with Patrick Zimmerman taking on Elroy. Most controversially, however, after having recorded all of her lines, Janet Waldo was replaced as Judy by Tiffany, who was under contract by Universal's MCA Records. Initially hired to supply pop tunes and Judy's singing voice, Tiffany ended up recording the entire role at the insistence of her management and Universal, essentially using the movie as a PR gimmick and a way to kickstart her film career, which certainly never took off. Waldo said at the time that she was totally devastated, noting, "It's like part of me has been killed. I can't think of her as Judy Jetson. I think of me as Judy Jetson, and so do millions of Jetsons fans." Barbera is said to have made a public apology at Messick's retirement party in 1997, which Waldo accepted. The film saw a decent opening week, but rapidly lost momentum, unable to turn a profit. It was received poorly by critics, with Charles Solomon of the Los Angeles Times saying that filmmakers didn't know whether they're making a with it musical for teenagers or recreating the ingenuous humour of a 60s TV show, while Siskel and Ebert gave it 2 thumbs down and noted it to have no imagination whatsoever, later calling it one of the 10 worst films of 1990. Audiences were also critical of the film for its major deviations from the series, its more fantastical and saccharine tone, its bizarre environmentalist messages, and for shamelessly using the franchise as a multi-million-dollar marketing ploy for a pop star. It continues to be a much maligned entry in the Jetsons canon. Following the movie, the Jetsons disappeared from major productions for almost 3 decades. Kept alive throughout the 1990s in dozens of television commercials, a plethora of video games, and numerous comic series, published by Harvey, Archie, and DC. They also appeared as the lead characters of the 1991 Fantastic World of Hanna-Barbera attraction at Universal Studios Florida, which remained in operation until 2002. In the early 2000s, Spumco produced 2 incredibly bizarre flash animated web shorts for Cartoon Network's website, 2001's Father and Son Day and 2002's The Best Son, both produced in the company's trademark stylized gross-out style, utilizing crude humor, disgusting visuals, obscene characterizations, and confronting situations. For example, in Best Son, George and Jane are depicted as abusive parents who replace Elroy with a robot. While these appear like parodies, they were officially co-produced by Hanna-Barbera, sadly becoming the final Jetsons projects that the creators were involved in before their deaths. In 2004, the Jetsons guest starred in Harvey Birdman Attorney at Law episode Back to the Present. In this episode, the Jetsons travel back in time to sue humanity for the future destruction of Earth, this time revealing a planet-wide flood caused by the melting of the polar ice caps to be the reason for the exile of the Earth's surface. The characters were again designed like their original iterations, with Harvey Birdman utilizing limited animation. With crass humor, this minor revival was certainly more adult than the original series, likely in hopes of bringing the characters back into the social conscience of older viewers. Regardless, the Jetsons didn't appear again until 2017's direct-to-home media movie, The Jetsons and WWE Robo WrestleMania, their first major production in 27 years. The film was the 4th in a series of odd Hanna-Barbera WWE crossovers. In it, the Jetsons are forced to travel back in time to assemble a team of WWE superstars to battle against a squadron of rogue WrestleBots set on taking over the Earth. The film was produced in a vibrant, modern limited animation, and as the original stars had all passed away, employed new vocal talents. While the earlier Hanna-Barbera WWE films had been successful, the Jetsons and Flintstones crossovers are considered the worst of the bunch. Robo WrestleMania marked the final film in the series and the Jetsons' last major appearance so far. Between 2017 and 2018, however, they appeared in a 6-issue limited comic series as part of DC Comics' Hanna-Barbera Beyond initiative, which gave the characters and stories a darker, edgier, and more realistic interpretation, infusing them with modern and contemporary concepts while keeping the heart and soul of the classic animation. The series re-envisioned George as a family man living an analog life in a digital world, Jane as a brilliant NASA scientist working off-world, Judy as a social butterfly trying to discover her calling, Elroy as a rebel using robotic technology to break the rules, and Rosie as a robotic shell housing the downloaded conscience of George's late mother. This take saw the Jetsons as a bone-chilling dystopia, offering up yet another, more post-apocalyptic explanation for the state of living in the future. In 2021's Space Jam: A New Legacy, the Jetsons could be seen alongside other Hanna-Barbera and Warner characters spectating at the Looney Tunes vs Goon Squad basketball match. Even though just a small background cameo, this marked their screen debut in 3D computer animated form. While the Jetsons haven't appeared in any major productions for 5 years, Warner Brothers have been circling a potential theatrical film reboot for 2 decades. Initially planned as a live-action feature and later CG animated, various filmmakers have been attached to the project, including The Lion King's Rob Minkoff, Cheaper by the Dozen 2's Adam Shankman, Spy Kids' Robert Rodriguez, and Shrek 2's Conrad Vernon. A live-action TV sitcom pilot for ABC was also in development in 2017 by Roger Rabbit's Robert Zemeckis. Regardless of having somewhat disappeared from public view, it's impossible to ignore the impact that the Jetsons has had on contemporary culture and modern living. Smithsonian Magazine's Novak notes that the series stands as the single most important piece of 20th century futurism, and the expression Jetsons has become a colloquial term for any kind of super high-tech piece of equipment or concept. Apart from some of the more out there ideas, Jetsons is actually a pretty accurate depiction of our times. And while it would be ridiculous to say that the Jetsons predicted the future, after all, many of its ideas were taken from other futurist sources, it's clear that the series certainly inspired today's inventors and creators in making dreams a reality. Amongst the modern technologies and concepts that were foreshadowed in the Jetsons are large flat-screen televisions, home theaters, home desktop computers, tablet computers, smart watches, video calling technology, smart virtual assistants, the internet, online shopping, drones, EKG and MRI machines, telemedicine services, holograms, robotic vacuum cleaners, 3D printed food, home printers, treadmills, doggy treadmills, yes, they're a real thing, home offices, and tanning beds. And while jetpacks, flying cars, robot maids, and space tourism may still seem like the work of sci-fi, these are all things that are well and truly on the way, with plenty of other incredible tech soon to follow in the not-so-distant future, likely to be commonplace by the time 2062 rolls around. Regardless of whether they're still on our screens or not, it is quite clear, even in 2022, we already are the Jetsons. And at that, I'm throwing it over to you. I want to know, what is your favourite incarnation of the Jetsons, and are you hoping to see them back on our screens in the not-so-distant future? Fire away down in the comments below and let me know your thoughts. Hey everyone, if you haven't yet, smash that big old subscribe button up on your screen to keep up to date with all my content, and hit that like button down below. Also, don't forget to check me out on social media, and please consider supporting me over on Patreon for as little as $1 a month for exclusive videos, early access content, and to get your name up on the screen. Thanks again for watching.